The walls were still broken. Years had passed. Kings had risen and fallen. Empires had shifted like sand in the wind. But Jerusalem remained wounded, its gates burned with fire, its stones scattered like forgotten bones, its people living in shame. And far away, in the comfort of a foreign palace, a man held a cup in his hand, yet carried a burden in his heart.
The wall of Jerusalem is broken down, and its gates are burned with fire. The survivors are in great distress.
He was not a prophet. He was not a priest. He was a cupbearer. But heaven had chosen him, because sometimes God does not look for titles. He looks for hearts that cannot ignore what is broken. Tonight, we enter the story of a man who refused to look away, a man who prayed before he spoke, a man who rebuilt not just walls, but a people. But here is the question that lingers before we begin. What do you do when God places a burden on your heart that you cannot escape? This is the story of Nehemiah. The palace in Susa was filled with beauty. Marble pillars stretched toward the ceiling. Perfumed air drifted through the halls. Servants moved quietly, their footsteps soft against polished floors. Everything was ordered, controlled, secure. But Nehemiah's heart was not. He stood daily before the king, holding the cup that ensured the ruler's safety. One sip could mean death if poison had been slipped in. Yet Nehemiah did not fear the cup. He feared something else. Distance. Distance from the land of his fathers. Distance from the city of God. Distance from the place where his name once dwelled in glory. Then one day, the silence broke. His brother arrived. Dust still clung to his clothes. His face carried the weight of what he had seen. Nehemiah's question came quickly, almost urgently.
What of Jerusalem?
There was a pause, a heavy one. Then the answer came, and it changed everything. The people were struggling. The city was exposed. The walls were gone. And in that moment, something shifted inside Nehemiah. Not anger, not frustration, burden, a deep, unshakable burden, one that would not let him rest. Nehemiah did not call a meeting. He did not gather allies. He withdrew. Because some battles are not fought in public first. They are fought in the secret place. He sat down and he wept. Days passed. Food lost its taste. Sleep became shallow. His heart cried out to heaven. O Lord God of heaven, O great and awesome God, you who keep your covenant and mercy. Nehemiah 1:5. His voice was not loud, but it was real. He confessed, not just the sins of others, but his own. He humbled himself because he understood something powerful. You cannot rebuild what is broken while standing in pride. Then he remembered the promises, the ancient words spoken through Moses, the covenant that still stood. And so he prayed with boldness, not because of who he was, but because of who God is. And as his prayer came to an end, a quiet resolve formed within him. The burden was no longer just pain. It had become purpose. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. Yet the burden did not fade. It grew, until one day it showed. Nehemiah stood before the king. But something was different. His face betrayed him. The king noticed immediately.
Why are you sad?
It was a dangerous question, because sadness in the king's presence could be seen as disrespect, even disloyalty. Fear gripped Nehemiah, but something stronger rose within him. Truth. He spoke of Jerusalem, of its brokenness, of its shame. The king listened. Then came the question that would define everything.
The walls are broken, the gates burned, and the city lies in shame. What do you want?
Time seemed to pause, and in that silent moment, Nehemiah prayed again, quietly, quickly, inwardly. Then he spoke. He asked to go. He asked to rebuild. He asked for provision. And the king said yes, not reluctantly, but willingly. The king granted them to me, according to the good hand of my God upon me. Nehemiah 2:8. It was not luck, it was favor, divine favor. The journey to Jerusalem was long. Dusty roads stretched across the land. Each step carried anticipation and weight. And when Nehemiah finally arrived, he did not speak immediately. He observed, waited. Then under the cover of night, he went out. The city was quiet. The moonlight revealed what daylight might have softened. Broken gates, scattered stones, charred remains. At times, even his animal could not pass through the rubble. So he walked, carefully, silently, taking it all in. Because vision requires honesty. You must see the damage fully before you can rebuild it faithfully. When Nehemiah finally spoke to the people, his words carried both truth and hope. He did not hide the problem.
You see the distress we are in. Jerusalem is in ruins, and its gates have been destroyed by fire. Come, let us build.
Something ignited, a spark.
The God
Hope began to rise in hearts that had grown used to defeat.
Servants will arise
and one by one,
build.
Voices joined together.
We will rise.
Not tomorrow.
Not tomorrow.
Not someday.
Not someday.
Now.
Now. But not everyone celebrated. Voices rose from the outside, mocking, questioning, accusing.
Who do you think you are?
Do you really believe this will work?
Ridicule
Laughter
spread.
echoed, ridicule spread. But Nehemiah did not engage in arguments. He responded with something deeper, confidence in God. The God of heaven himself will prosper us. Nehemiah 2:20. And the work began. The sound of rebuilding filled the air, stone against stone, voices calling out instructions, families working side by side. But danger was never far. Threats increased, plans of attack spread in whispers.
Place the next stone firmly there. Keep your eyes sharp, guards. We must work and watch.
So Nehemiah adjusted. Half the men worked, half stood guard. And those who built with weapons at their side. Because sometimes obedience requires both faith and vigilance. And Nehemiah stood among them, not above them, encouraging, watching, leading. Do not be afraid. Remember the Lord, great and awesome. Nehemiah 4:14. Yet even as the walls rose, cracks appeared among the people. The poor cried out. They were being oppressed by their own brothers. Something broke inside Nehemiah. Not sorrow this time. Righteous anger. He confronted the leaders, called out injustice, demanded change. Because rebuilding walls without restoring hearts is empty work. And slowly, things began to shift. As the wall neared completion, the enemy changed tactics. No more mockery, now came invitations. Come, let us meet. But Nehemiah discerned the trap, and his response became one of the most powerful declarations. I am doing a great work, so that I cannot come down. Nehemiah 6:3. He refused distraction. refused manipulation, refused fear. Even when false prophets tried to deceive him, he stood firm. Because when you know your assignment, you do not abandon it for noise. The rebuilding of Jerusalem did not happen in silence. It happened under pressure. Because behind every voice of mockery, there were men with names, men with influence, men with something to lose. Sanballat, a governor of Samaria, a man of authority, a man used to control. Tobiah, an Ammonite official, connected, strategic, subtle, a man who had relationships even within Jerusalem itself. And Geshem the Arab, a leader of surrounding tribes, a man with reach, a man who understood power and alliances. These were not random critics. These were regional powers, and Nehemiah's mission threatened them. Because a strong Jerusalem meant a shift in influence. A rebuilt wall meant protection. Protection meant independence. Independence meant loss of control. And so, they resisted. At first they laughed, not because it was funny, but because mockery weakens confidence. Sanballat's voice carried across the watching crowd, sharp and cutting. Tobiah followed with sarcasm that stung like a whip. They called the people weak. They belittled their effort. They reduced their vision to something fragile and foolish. Because if they could make the builders doubt, the wall would never rise. But when mockery failed, something darker emerged. Anger, plans began to form. Whispers turned into strategies.
What if we attack them? What if we strike while they build?
Fear spread among the workers. Some began to look over their shoulders. Others slowed their work. But Nehemiah saw what was happening, and he refused to let fear take root. He placed guards. He armed the people. He positioned families together so they would fight not just for a wall, but for each other, because courage grows stronger when it has something to protect. Yet the enemies were not finished. Tobiah worked quietly, silently. He built connections with influential men inside Jerusalem. Letters were exchanged. Words were whispered behind closed doors. Some nobles spoke well of him, even to Nehemiah. This was not open war. This was infiltration. Because the most dangerous attacks do not come from the outside. They come from within. Then came the invitations, repeated, persistent. Come down. Let us talk. It sounded harmless, even wise. But Nehemiah knew, if he stepped away from the work, even for a moment, the momentum could be lost. So he answered with clarity and strength.
I am doing a great work. I cannot come down.
And when they saw he would not be distracted, they tried deception. A message came, urgent, alarming.
There is danger! Come hide! Protect yourself! I am doing a great work. I cannot come down.
But it was a trap. If Nehemiah acted in fear, he would disobey God. If he hid, he would weaken the people. But he discerned it. He saw the hand behind the words, and he stood firm. Then came the final attack. Rumors, accusations, public letters meant to shame him, to pressure him, to force him into reacting. You are rebelling. You want to become king. But Nehemiah did not defend himself with noise. He simply answered with truth. And then he prayed, because when the pressure rises, prayer must rise higher. And in the end, none of it worked. Not the mockery, not the threats, not the lies, not the fear, because Nehemiah was anchored in purpose, in prayer, in God. And so, with the noise still in the background, with threats still lingering in the air. The work continued, stone by stone, step by step, until finally, the wall stood complete. What had once been broken now stood strong. What had once brought shame now brought dignity. And it had been done in just 52 days. The nations around them saw it. The enemies heard of it. And something shifted. They realized this was not human strength. This was God. But Nehemiah understood something deeper. Walls protect a city, but only truth transforms a people. So the law was brought out. The people gathered, men, women, children, standing, listening. And as the words were read, something happened. Conviction, tears, realization. They saw how far they had drifted, how much had been lost, and sorrow filled the air. But Nehemiah lifted his voice and said,
"Do not sorrow, for the joy of the Lord is your strength."
Do not sorrow, for the joy of the Lord is your strength. Nehemiah 8:10. And in that moment, something beautiful happened. The people did not remain in sorrow. They turned back. They remembered who they were, and joy began to rise again. The sound of joy did not fade that day. It spread through the streets, through the homes, through the hearts of the people. What began as weeping had turned into worship. What began as conviction had become restoration. But Nehemiah understood something deeper still. A moment of emotion is not enough. Transformation must be sustained. The people did not scatter after hearing the law. They leaned in, day after day. They returned. They listened. They learned. They rediscovered what had been forgotten. And as the words were read again, something remarkable happened. They found instructions they had not followed in generations. The Feast of Tabernacles, a command given long ago through Moses, a reminder of wilderness days when God Himself had sustained them. So the people obeyed, they went out, they gathered branches, olive, myrtle, palm, and they built booths on rooftops, in courtyards, in the open squares, all across Jerusalem. Shelters began to rise, simple, temporary, but deeply meaningful. And as they lived in them, they remembered God had never abandoned them, even in the wilderness, even in exile, even in brokenness. And the scripture says, there was very great gladness. But the restoration did not stop at celebration. It went deeper. On another day, the people gathered again, this time not with joy first, but with humility. They stood in fasting, clothed in sackcloth, dust upon their heads, and for hours the law was read, and for hours they confessed, not just the sins of others, but their own. They spoke of rebellion, of disobedience, of forgetting God, and then they remembered something else, His mercy, how again and again He had remained faithful, even when they had not, and their voices rose, not just in sorrow, but in reverence, because they finally saw it clearly. God had been just, God had been patient, God had been good. This time, they did not walk away unchanged. They made a decision, a real one, a written one. Leaders, Levites, priests, they placed their names on a covenant, a commitment before God. They vowed to walk in His law, to keep His commands, to honor His house, to separate from practices that had once led them astray, to restore what had been neglected. This was not emotion. This was alignment. This was a people choosing obedience. And then, the moment came. The wall that had once been broken now stood complete. But it would not simply be admired. It would be dedicated, consecrated, given back to God. Nehemiah gathered the people. Singers were appointed, musicians assembled, cymbals, harps, lyres, and 2 great choirs were formed. They did not stand still. They moved. One choir went one direction along the wall, the other the opposite way, walking on top of the very structure that once lay in ruins. Their voices lifted, songs of thanksgiving, songs of victory, songs of remembrance. Nehemiah himself walked with one of the groups, not above the people, but among them. And as the 2 choirs came together, they met at the house of God. And the sound of joy in Jerusalem was so loud that it was heard far away, because this was not just the dedication of a wall, it was the restoration of a people. But Nehemiah knew if what was rebuilt was not protected, it could be lost again. So he acted. He appointed gatekeepers, singers, Levites, each in their place. Order was restored. Responsibility was established. The house of God was no longer neglected. The people began to bring their offerings again. Provision returned. Worship continued. And the system that sustained spiritual life was rebuilt. For a time, Nehemiah left Jerusalem. He returned to serve the king. But when he came back, he saw something troubling. Some had drifted again. Compromise had crept in. The temple had been misused. The Sabbath ignored. Unholy alliances formed. And Nehemiah did not stay silent. This time, his response was not quiet burden. It was bold correction. He confronted leaders. He cleared out corruption. He restored the temple.
Wait, stop!
He commanded the gates to be
this.
shut on the Sabbath.
By what right?
He called the people back. Again.
Open the gates.
Because true leadership does not just build. It protects. It corrects. It restores again and again if necessary. Nehemiah was not a prophet. He was not a priest. He was a man who carried a burden and refused to ignore it. He rebuilt walls, but more than that, he rebuilt a people. He taught them something powerful, that prayer must come before action, that obedience must follow conviction, that restoration is not a moment, it is a commitment. And in the end, it was not strength that completed the work. It was not strategy. It was not position. It was God. The walls stood. The people were restored. The joy returned. But the question remains, what has been broken in your life that God is calling you to rebuild? Because the same truth still stands. When God gives the vision, when prayer leads the way, when you refuse distraction, when you walk in obedience, what is broken can stand again, stronger, restored,
we are finally
alive.
Safe.
It feels like a new beginning.
If this story spoke to you, don't scroll away. Pause, reflect, comment down below. Remember me, oh my God, for good. And pray this simple prayer, Lord, strengthen my hands. If you believe God is raising builders in this generation, type it in the comments. And share this message so someone else can rise and rebuild what they thought was lost.
Look so beautiful in the sunlight.